Part 3, Chapter 13. Hand over your second skin, too. Can you behead a man whose head has already been cut off? You can. Can you skin the hide off a man when he has already been skinned? You can. This was all invented in our camps. This was all devised in the archipelago. So let it not be said that the brigade was our only Soviet contribution to world penal science. Is not the second camp term a contribution too? The waves which surge into the archipelago from outside do not die down there and do not subside freely, but are pumped through the pipes of the second interrogation. Oh, blessed are those pitiless tyrannies, those despotisms, those savage countries, where a person once arrested cannot be arrested a second time, where once in prison he cannot be re-imprisoned, where a person who has been tried cannot be tried again, where a sentenced person cannot be sentenced again. But in our country, everything is permissible. When a man is flat on his back, irrevocably doomed and in the depths of despair, how convenient it is to poleaxe him again. The ethics of our prison chiefs are, beat the man who's down. And the ethics of our security officers are, use corpses as stepping stones. We may take it that camp interrogations and camp court were born in Solovki, although what they did there was simply to push them into the bell tower basement and finish them off. During the period of the 5-year plans and of the metastases, they began to employ the second camp term instead of the bullet. For how otherwise, without a second, or third, or fourth, terms, could they secrete in the bosom of the archipelago and destroy all those marked down for destruction? The generation of new prison terms, like the growing of a snake's rings, is a form of archipelago life. As long as our camps thrived and our exile lasted, this black threat hovered over the heads of the convicted, to be given a new term before they had finished the first one. Second camp terms were handed out every year, but most intensively in 1937 and 1938 during the war years. In 1948 to 1949, the burden of second terms was transferred outside. They overlooked, they missed, prisoners who should have been resentenced in camp, and then had to haul them back into camp from outside. These were even called repeaters, whereas those resentenced inside didn't get a special name. And it was a mercy, an automated mercy, when in 1938, second camp terms were given out without any second arrest, without a camp interrogation, without a camp court, when the prisoners were simply called up in the brigades to the records and classification section and told to sign for their second terms. For refusing to sign, you were simply put in a punishment block, as for smoking where it wasn't allowed. And they also had it explained to them in a very human way. We aren't telling you that you are guilty of anything, but just sign that you have been informed. And it was useless to try to get out of it, as if, in the dark infinity of the archipelago, 8 was any way distinct from 18, or a tenor at the start from a tenor at the end of a sentence. The only important thing was that they did not claw and tear your body today. Now we can understand. The epidemic of camp sentences in 1938 was the result of a directive from above. It was there at the top they suddenly came to their senses and realized they had been handed out too little, that they had to pile it on, and shoot some too, and thus frighten the rest. But the epidemic of camp cases during the war was stimulated by a happy spark from below, too, by the features of the popular initiative. In all likelihood, there was an order from above that during the war the most colorful and notable individuals in each camp, who might become centers of rebellion, had to be suppressed and isolated. The bloody local boys immediately sensed the riches in this vein, their own deliverance from the front. This was evidently guessed in more than one camp and rapidly taken up as useful, ingenious, and a salvation. The camp Chekists also helped fill up the machine gun embrasures, but with other people's bodies. Let the historian picture to himself the pulse of those years. The front was moving east. The Germans were around Leningrad, outside Moscow, in Voronezh, on the Volga, and in the foothills of the Caucasus. In the rear there were even fewer men. Every healthy male figure aroused reproachful glances. Everything for the front. There was no price too big for the government to pay to stop Hitler, and only the camp officers, and their confreres in state security, were well-fed, white, soft-skinned, idle, all in their places in the rear. And the farther into Siberia and the north they were, the quieter things were. We must soberly understand, theirs was a shaky prosperity, due to end at the first outcry. Bring out those rosy-cheeked, smart camp fellows. No battle experience? So they had ideology, and they would be lucky to end up in the police or in the behind-the-lines obstacle detachments. But it could happen otherwise. Otherwise it was into officer battalions and be thrown into the Battle of Stalingrad. In the summer of 1942, they picked up whole officer training schools and hurled them into the front, uncertified, their courses unfinished. All the young and healthy convoy guards had already been scraped up for the front, and the camps hadn't fallen apart. It was all right, and they wouldn't fall apart if the security officers were called up either. There were already rumors. Draft deferment, that was life. Draft deferment, that was happiness. How could you keep your draft deferment? Easy, you simply had to prove your importance. You had to prove that if it were not for Chekist vigilance the camps would blow apart, that they were a cauldron of seething tar, and then our whole glorious front would collapse. It was right here in the camps, in the tundra and the taiga, that the white-chested security chiefs were holding back the fifth column, holding back Hitler. This was their contribution to victory. Not sparing themselves, they conducted interrogation after interrogation, exposing plot after plot. Until now, only the unhappy, worn-out camp inmates, tearing the bread from each other's mouths, had been fighting for their lives. But now the impotent Chekist officers shamelessly entered the fray. You croak today, me tomorrow. Better you should perish and put off my death, you dirty animal. And what was this? Plots were discovered in every camp. More plots, still more. Ever larger in scale, and ever broader. Oh, those perfidious last-leggers! They were just feigning that they could be blown over by the wind. Their paper-thin, pellagra-stricken hands were secretly reaching for the machine guns. Oh, thank you, security section. Oh, savior of the motherland, the third section. And you? You thought that in camp at least you could unburden your soul, that here you could at least complain aloud. My sentence is too long. They fed me badly. I have too much to work. Or you thought that here you could at least repeat what you got your term for. But if you say any of this aloud, you are done for. You are doomed to get a new tenor. True, once a new camp tenor begins, at least the first is erased, so that it works out that you serve not 20, but some 13 or 15 or the like, which would be more than you can survive. But you are sure you haven't been silent as a fish, and then you are grabbed anyway? Quite right. They couldn't help grabbing you no matter how you behaved. After all, they don't grab for something, but because. It's the same principle according to which they clip the wool off freedom, too. When the third section gang goes hunting, it picks a list of the most noticeable people in the camp, and that is the list they then dictate to Babik. In camp, after all, it is even more difficult to hide. Everything is out in the open. And there is only one salvation for a person, to be a zero, a total zero, a zero from the very beginning. To stick with you at charge presents no problem. When the plots came to an end after 1943, the Germans began to retreat. A multitude of cases of propaganda appeared. Those godfathers still didn't want to go to the front. In the Burepolom Camp, for example, the following selection was available. Hostile activity against the policy of the Soviet Communist Party and the Soviet government. And what it was you can guess for yourself. Expression of defeatist fabrications. Expression of slanderous opinions about the material situation of the workers of the Soviet Union. Telling the truth was slander. Expression of a desire for the restoration of the capitalist system, expression of a grudge against the Soviet government. This was particularly impudent. Who are you, you bastard, to nurse grudges? So you got a tenner, and you should have kept your mouth shut. A 70-year-old former Tsarist diplomat was charged with making the following propaganda: that the working class in the USSR lives badly, that Gorky was a bad writer. To say that they had gone too far in bringing these charges against him is out of the question. They always handed out sentences for Gorky. That's how he had set himself up. Svortskov, for example, in Lakimlag, near Umstvim, harvested 15 years, and among the charges against him was the following. He had unfavorably contrasted the proletarian poet Mayakovsky with a certain bourgeois poet. That's what it said in the formal charges against him, and it was enough to get him convicted. And from the minutes of the interrogation we can establish who that certain bourgeois poet was. It was Pushkin. To get a sentence for Pushkin, that in truth was a rarity. After that, therefore, Martinson, who really did say in the tin shop that the USSR was one big camp, ought to have sung praise to God that he got off with a tenner. As ought those refusing to work who got a termer instead of execution. But it was not the number of years, not the empty and fantastic length of years, that made these second terms so awful, but how you got them. How you had to crawl through that iron pipe in the ice and snow to get them. It would seem that arrest would be a nothing for a camp inmate. For a person who had once been arrested from his warm domestic bed, what did it matter to be arrested again from an uncomfortable barracks with bare bunks? But it certainly did. In the barracks the stove was warm and a full bread ration was given. But here came the jailer and jerked you by the foot at night. Gather up your things! Oh, how you didn't want to go. People, people, I love you. End of Part 3, Chapter 13.